Built in 1948 for the young Princess Elizabeth, this Rolls-Royce is the oldest of 5 that served the royal household. Her mother used this Daimler Landaulette in the same year to tour South Africa. Today it's pensioned off for the odd wedding and a bit of part-time chauffeuring at the hands of collector John Wentworth. Ushered into the back seat where the Queen Mother once sat is today's passenger, Debbie Callingham, daughter-in-law of the infamous Lady Docker. In their day, the Dockers were as famous for their glamorous lifestyle as they were for running one of Britain's biggest motor groups, particularly Lady Docker, or Naughty Nora as she was known.
She said be expensive, and that's why she loved Daimler so much, you know, because they were expensive. The thing was that she brought a bit of light into the 50s. She made people think, oh yeah, there is still fun about, you know, after the dreary war years.
All Castleford was out as a gold-plated Daimler drove by. This luxurious transport brought Lady Docker to a marbles match in aid of the British Empire Cancer Relief Fund. She was leading her team against a group of local factory girls. Yes, whether it's Monte Carlo or marbles, Lady Docker's a star performer.
She certainly was. She even became Britain's marbles champion. Nora Docker always took a keen interest in the promotion of Daimler, the company her husband ran. The pre-war market for these grand cars was in carrying the well-off majestically from place to place. After the war, sales of Daimlers plummeted. Naughty Nora tried to change all this.
She liked the idea of a car being something that was attractive and, you know, fashionable.
Each year, the Dockers commissioned a brash new Daimler for their own use. The first was the Gold Car. It stole the 1951 Earl's Court Motor Show, boasting 7,000 hand-painted gold stars, an interior trimmed in golden silk, cabinets made from a single trunk of Australian camphor wood, and fitted luggage covered in the skins of a swamp load of crocodiles. In a Britain hungry for glamour, the Dockers were rivals to royalty. They even had a yacht to match Britannia.
The Shamara, the luxury yacht on which the Dockers have entertained, among others, parties of miners. After all, one of these chaps might be thinking of buying a Daimler, and if he's hesitating, Lady Docker wants to help him make up his mind.
The newsreel cynicism was well-founded. The trouble was, the Dockers' gin palace lifestyle was repugnant to Daimler's traditional customers, and it didn't come cheap.
OK, they went through £5 million in 2 years in the 50s, which is quite a lot of money. It was such a dull, grey sort of period of time that it appeared to be vulgar. I don't think the cars were vulgar at all. I think the cars were brilliant.
Brilliant the cars might have been, but their opulence was somehow out of keeping for holders of a royal warrant.
The reason that the Royals changed from Daimlers to Rollses was because of the Dockers. Didn't want, you know, a car that was anyway attached to some woman as she was.
After 5 over-the-top cars, the shareholders finally rebelled when Nora spent £8,000 on dresses for the Paris Motor Show. She called it advertising.
The shareholders, it seems, are ungrateful. They prefer more orthodox advertising, and in spite of the Dockers' eloquence, they confirm the sacking.
The Queen Mum and Nora both loved Daimlers.
Despite the acrimonious sacking, the Queen Mother, a fan of Daimlers since pre-war days, kept faith. After the Dockers left, all their gold cars were stripped of their extravagant features, repainted, and like the Dockers themselves, went abroad. John Wentworth is a big fan of ex-royal Daimlers. He's got 12, but they're not all kept in the manner to which they were accustomed. These remains are not royal. Known as the Golden Zebra car, this was the last Docker Daimler ever built.
It's a two-door coupe, aluminium bodied, about 19 foot long. The whole thing was ivory white. All the door handles and bumpers were gold plated, not gold leaf, gold plated. The seats were trimmed with zebra skin and cream leather, and the dashboard and door cappings were veneered with real ivory. And it had sort of fitted vanity units with in ivory with cigarette cases with their crest on it in gold, and picnic equipment by Aspreys. That seems to have gone missing.
Even the Golden Zebra's chassis was painted in ivory white.
I got it back from California, where some gentleman had had it for 16 years and done 700 miles on it. So I'm hoping to be able to restore it back to its original condition, which could be quite difficult because when it was made, it basically cost the price of 6 houses to build it.
Part of that hefty price was the gold-plated fittings. Sir John was quite chuffed to hear from an antique dealer who, 20 years before, had bought a box full of tarnished car parts.
I went to meet him and we eventually negotiated a price and I acquired them. And they are the original lights that went on this car. It cost me £2,000. They looked sort of tarnished to me and I thought, well, how do we clean gold? So a friend of mine is a jeweller and apparently there's a little sort of bath and it cleans up jewellery. So I borrowed this from him and tentatively put 2 headlights in and switched it on and stood back for 20 minutes. And then I lifted one out and it looked like all the gold plate was peeling off. And I thought, no, someone's had it 24 years and I've destroyed it in 5 minutes or 20 minutes. But then I found out it wasn't that, they'd actually been lacquered. And what was coming off was the lacquer or the varnish. So get that off, and they were beautifully gold plated and they were unmarked. So we sort of finished all that job off and they look marvellous now.
This glittering car was a rival for the sleek Continental. In contrast to the Bentley, the Armstrong Siddeley Star Sapphire positively sparkles with chrome. These big cars have always been part of motor mechanic Kerry Schroeder's life.
My father had bought one brand new in 1960 when I was only 9 years old, and I remember him then saying how much better a motor car it was than most of the contemporary Jaguars and Daimlers and that sort of thing.
Handling is unusual of a car of this size in that it does turn in well, it does hold the road very well, it doesn't understeer like most lumbering limousine type 2-ton cars of the time. The transmission is very well suited to the engine, so it gives you a huge spectrum of torque and flexibility. There's no need to change down, it can stay in top.
Kerry acquired the car that he drives today in 1977, though he once had the chance to salvage his father's actual car.
I in fact managed to buy the car back in 1972 for a mere £50. Although it did drive, it was fairly rotten, there was a great deal wrong with it, it was a bit ragged, and I hadn't got the knowledge that I later found out I would have needed to have restored that car. And so I moved it on, I sold it for what I'd got it for, and I believe it ended up on the Bangor racing track.
Though Kerry was unable to prevent his father's car meeting a sad end, his enthusiasm for the marque remained undiminished.
I think it's very important to have style and chrome and two-tone paintwork, all of which help a car to have a presence, and I think this car has a magnificent presence. If you look at the shape of the side lights, for example, these are a standard Lucas side light, but they were only, as far as I know, used by Armstrong Siddeley and Jaguar on their XK120. But do you notice how the shape of them enhances the shape and the flow of the wing? I think they look beautiful just on the top there. The headlights are actually out of an earlier model, And this is one thing that I inherited from my father. He, when he ordered his new car, asked the factory to fit the earlier type of headlights with these little King of the Road pods on top, because it just looks nicer from the driver's point of view, and the earlier 3-star headlamps as well are a better looking light. Lots of chrome all over the front of the car. The Sphinx, which is the mascot of Armstrong Siddeley, has been for years and years, sits proudly on the top of the bonnet there, and again looks fabulous from the driver's seat as well as from outside. It's a nice way to point your eye down the road.
Launched at the 1958 Motor Show, the Star Sapphire was a genuine Grand Tourer. It was great, provided you had miniature luggage.
Boot looks massive, but in fact the lid only comes up that high, so in fact you couldn't get a great deal in this boot, even though it does look large. What is there though is the toolkit, which came along with most cars of this type and style in those days. There's actually just about everything you would ever need, certainly for owner maintenance to be conducted, but also for major maintenance you really don't need a great deal more. The boot lid closes normally rather squeakily, I'm afraid, until it just rests on the stops down there. And the way to complete the closing of the boot is to put your fingers on these 2 sections either side of the number plate lamp and press firmly, and you get that wonderful clunk, and that's closed.
The Star Sapphire, with its thirsty 6-cylinder 4-litre engine and lounge-like interior, was a car with features redolent of another era. In an age that spawned the Mini and the E-Type Jaguar, these cars looked like antique furniture. Armstrong Siddeley stopped making cars in 1960, victims of motoring fashion and, unlike less flamboyant marques, a lack of royal patronage.